Hey guys, tonight we begin with the history of what hygiene was like in medieval times. Now dim the lights and turn on the fan for that soft background hum. And let me know in the comments where you are watching from in the world. You've come to the right place to rest your mind and drift gently into the past. For the next few hours, we'll travel slowly, quietly through a world long gone. A world of stone keeps and timber-built halls, of slow mornings and smoky hearths, of rainwater, herbs, and linen cloths. Tonight's story is not one of battles or kings. It's about something much simpler, how people kept themselves clean, or tried to, in the medieval world. In this long and gentle journey, you'll wander through narrow streets lined with wooden houses, hear the faint splash of water drawn from wells, and smell the mingling scents of earth, wood smoke, and rosemary. You'll discover how men and women rose from straw-filled mattresses, how they washed and dressed, and how they found small comforts in a time before soap as we know it. Each moment will unfold at its own unhurried pace. There is no rush here. You may let your mind drift in and out of the words, as if half dreaming. And if you fall asleep along the way, that's perfectly fine. History will continue without you, soft and steady as the ticking of time itself. So take a slow breath in and imagine the world growing dim around you. The flicker of a candle, the sound of the wind at a window slit, and somewhere far off, the tolling of a church bell calling another medieval morning to life. Imagine yourself waking in a small medieval cottage. It is early before sunrise. The room is dim, lit only by the dull orange glow of embers left from the night's fire. The air is cool and still. You can hear the faint rustle of straw beneath your blanket, and the quiet breathing of others in the same room, your family perhaps, or your servants, depending on your station in life. In much of medieval Europe, people shared sleeping spaces. Privacy was a luxury known mostly to the wealthy. For most, the rhythm of life began with the dawn, when roosters crowed and the first pale light crept through cracks in the shutters. Your bed is not the soft kind we know today. It's a simple wooden frame, perhaps, with ropes strung tightly across to support a mattress filled with straw, reeds, or wool if you were fortunate. The straw crackles faintly when you move. Over you is a rough linen sheet, perhaps a thin woolen blanket for warmth. You rise slowly, feeling the chill of the stone or packed earth floor beneath your feet. Many homes had no flooring beyond earth, covered with rushes, dry grasses, sometimes mixed with herbs like lavender or meadowsweet to freshen the air. The scent of those herbs lingers faintly, blending with the smell of wood smoke and the cold morning air. There are no mirrors here, no taps or running water. Cleanliness, in the modern sense, was a matter of ingenuity and routine. On a small wooden table stands a basin, perhaps made of pewter, or earthenware if you are poor. Next to it, a small jug filled with water collected the day before, or caught from the rain. You pour a little into the basin. The sound is soft like a whispering stream. The water is cold, but you splash it on your face nonetheless. It wakes you gently, prickling your skin. This is your morning wash. In some homes, especially among the better off, servants would heat a small kettle to warm the water. But most people simply made do with what they had. Hands, face, and sometimes arms were washed. Feet too, if the weather allowed. It was enough to feel fresh and ready for the day's labor. Soap, as we think of it, was rare. When it existed, it was harsh and expensive, made from animal fat mixed with ashes or lye. So instead, people often used linen cloths dipped in water or rubbed their skin with handfuls of herb sage, rosemary, or mint to remove odors and bring a feeling of cleanliness. In monasteries, monks might use fine sand or ashes to scrub their hands before meals. The act of washing was both physical and spiritual, a small ritual of renewal. Now imagine stepping outside your cottage. The sun has not yet cleared the horizon, but the world is stirring. A distant cow lows. The smell of damp earth rises with the mist. Somewhere, a church bell tolls prime the first hour of prayer. If you were a peasant, your day would begin soon with work in the fields or tending animals. If you lived in a town, you might sweep your shop front or prepare goods for sale. And if you were among the gentry, your servants would bring you a basin, towels, and perhaps a touch of scented vinegar for the face. Across all ranks, this quiet act of washing marked the threshold between sleep and wakefulness. There is something steady and humble in these routines. A rhythm that repeats day after day, century after century. You can almost hear the splash of water in 1,000 households, echoing softly through time. Let's pause here for a moment and think about the sensory world of these mornings. The faint warmth of the hearth, the smell of last night's smoke, the soft creak of wooden beams. Outside, the distant chatter of sparrows. Inside, the rustle of cloth, the sound of hands drying on linen. Everything unfolds slowly, deliberately. No one hurries because there is nowhere to rush to before the tasks of the day begin. In larger houses or castles, mornings were a little different. Servants would rise first, long before their masters, to rekindle fires, draw water, and prepare the chamber for waking. Water had to be fetched from wells or cisterns, often heavy, cold, and carried in wooden buckets. A noble might be attended by a valet or lady's maid, who would bring warm water and soft towels embroidered with the family's crest. Even so, the essentials were the same. The human wish to feel clean, refreshed, and ready to face the day. Sometimes people would sprinkle their clothes or hands with rose water or vinegar infused with herbs. These simple scents cut through the mustiness of enclosed spaces and gave a sense of purity. In monasteries and convents, washing was part of spiritual discipline. Monks and nuns washed their hands before prayers, believing that cleanliness reflected inner order. Yet baths were rare, and full immersion in water was often reserved for specific times before major festivals or after illness. Children too learned from an early age the simple rituals of hygiene. A mother might wash her baby in a small wooden tub by the fire, cooing softly as the child splashed. Older children might help fetch water, learning the rhythm of daily chores that shaped their lives. It's easy, from the comfort of the modern world, to think of medieval life as dirty or unpleasant. But in truth, people cared deeply about appearances, smell, and cleanliness within the limits of their world. They valued fresh clothing, combed hair, and clean hands. They understood, in their own way, the link between cleanliness and health, even if they didn't know about microbes. And so each morning began with these small, tender acts of care. A splash of water, a brushed beard, a plaited braid, a cloth gently pressed to the face, the day's first light touching the walls. As the sun rose higher, the rhythms of medieval life would quicken, the sound of mills turning, hooves clattering on cobbles, the chatter of markets. But for now, we remain in that quiet early hour, before work, before noise. The air is cool, the world still soft. And the people of the Middle Ages begin their day, as we do, by washing away sleep and greeting the light. Now that we've lingered in the calm of a medieval morning, let us move gently onward to the next part of our journey, where we step beyond the private chamber and into the warm, communal hum of medieval bathhouses. The town is awake. The sound of carts rumbles over uneven stones. Church bells mark the passing of another hour. And somewhere, at the edge of a square or along a narrow lane, a door opens to a place of warmth and steam, a medieval bathhouse. Bathing, for much of medieval Europe, was both a necessity and a pleasure. It was a social ritual as much as a cleansing one, a place where people came together to wash, to talk, and to rest from their daily work. Yet the story of these bathhouses is one of rise and quiet decline, from the proud echoes of Roman baths to humble wooden tubs tucked behind taverns. So take a breath, and imagine stepping into one. At first, you notice the warmth. Outside, the air is cool, perhaps the sharp bite of autumn, but here, it is soft and heavy, thick with the scent of steam and wood. A faint aroma of herbs lingers, soapwort, perhaps, or marjoram, steeped in hot water to scent the air. You hear the gentle splash of water, the creak of wooden boards, the quiet murmur of conversation. The medieval bathhouse was not luxurious by modern standards. In smaller towns, it might be a single large room built of timber, lined with benches and filled with great wooden tubs. Hot stones or coals beneath a copper cauldron kept the water warm, and steam rose like mist around the rafters. Candles flickered, their light reflected in small pools. In the cities like Paris or London, larger establishments might boast several rooms, one for hot baths, another for cooling down, and sometimes a chamber for eating or resting. To bathe here was to step briefly outside the rhythm of toil. For a few coins, a man or woman could sink into warm water and feel the ache of work fade from their body. Apprentices came after their day in the workshop. Travelers came to wash off the dust of the road. And merchants, priests, and even nobles might visit for the company as much as for the cleanliness. In those early centuries, the 12th, 13th, and 14th bathing was not seen as decadent. It was ordinary, even recommended. Medical treatises of the time spoke of the benefits of bathing for health and spirit. Physicians wrote that warm water opened the pores and helped the humors flow. Of course, they did not speak of germs, for that knowledge lay centuries ahead, but they understood in their way that water soothed and renewed. Picture a typical evening. Outside, the streets darken. Lanterns are lit one by one, and from the doorway of the bathhouse comes the glow of firelight and the sound of laughter quiet. Not raucous, but companionable. Inside, men and women shed their outer garments and step carefully into the tubs. They sit shoulder to shoulder, perhaps, or recline against smooth wooden edges. Water laps gently against skin. Steam curls upward. The warmth relaxes muscles made tight from long hours of labor. Soap, when available, is rubbed between the hands and over the body, a mixture of tallow, ashes, and sometimes herbs. More often, people used bundles of fragrant plants, rosemary, chamomile, or bay leaves tied together to make a primitive sponge. Others rubbed themselves with fine sand or bran to remove oil and dirt. There is something deeply human in these shared silences, the comfort of being surrounded by others, yet at ease, unhurried, half drowsy in the warmth. You can almost hear the soft laughter, the echo of voices against damp walls, and the splash of water poured from a jug. The tradition of public bathing was inherited, in spirit if not in form, from the ancient Romans. When Rome's influence faded in Western Europe, its grand marble baths fell silent. But the idea that washing together could be civilized and restorative endured. In cities like Paris, bathhouses became common by the 13th century. Records mention dozens scattered through the city, their signs swinging gently above narrow streets, a small wooden tub, a steaming kettle, or the image of a mermaid. Bath attendants, called bathiators, prepared the rooms. They stoked the fires, fetched water from wells, and tended to customers with towels and drinks. Yes, drinks for bathing could be leisurely. Wine or ale was often served, along with small dishes of food. Imagine the gentle murmur of conversation as water rippled and candles burned low. In wealthier towns, some bathhouses even provided music, a lute or small pipe echoing faintly through the mist. Couples might visit together. Friends shared a bath to celebrate a successful trade. Families brought their children. It was a space of mingled warmth, chatter, and repose. But as the centuries turned, attitudes began to change. By the late Middle Ages, suspicion grew around the bathhouse. What had once been innocent was whispered to be decadent. Moralists, and later preachers, warned that such places tempted the flesh. The church, ever watchful of the soul's purity, frowned on mixed bathing. And so little by little, the bathhouses changed. Screens were erected between men's and women's areas. Times of access were divided by gender. But still, the warmth of the water called to people, especially in winter, when rivers froze and washing at home was a trial. Disease too began to shadow the tradition. When plagues swept through Europe, people began to fear that heat and open pores made the body vulnerable to miasmas, the bad airs. They believed carried illness. Ironically, the very act of bathing, once thought to preserve health, was said to invite sickness. Many bathhouses closed their doors. Others survived quietly, catering to travelers or the poor. And yet the memory of those places lingered, soft as a dream of steam and water. In the countryside, where there were no public baths, bathing took simpler forms. Families filled wooden tubs by the hearth. Water was heated in great kettles and poured in slowly, steaming the air. Often, one tub served several people, a parent first, then children, then perhaps servants or farmhands. The water grew cloudy, but no one minded much. It was a rare comfort, and it would be another week or month before the next. Imagine that small cottage again, the firelight flickering on the walls, the scent of warm water and wood smoke mingling in the air. The sound of laughter as children splash and a mother scolds gently, smiling. Even in simplicity, there is tenderness. For monks, bathing had a stricter rhythm. The rule of Saint Benedict, written in the 6th century, permitted baths only when necessary for illness or special occasions. Still, cleanliness was valued as part of humility and order. Monks washed their hands before prayers, their feet before the refectory. Once or twice a year, communal baths were arranged, with quiet precision. In these cloistered spaces, bathing was almost a meditation, a renewal of body and spirit alike. Imagine the monastery bathhouse at dusk. The light is dim, filtered through narrow windows. A monk pours warm water over another's hands, murmuring a prayer. The sound echoes softly against stone. In the silence, there is peace. By the 16th century, many bathhouses had vanished. Public fears of contagion, combined with moral disapproval, closed their doors. Private bathing became the province of the wealthy, once again done in personal chambers, with tubs carried in and filled by servants. The poor made do with rivers, wells, or simple cloths dipped in basins. And yet, the idea of the bathhouse never quite disappeared. It reawakened centuries later in new forms: the Ottoman hammam, the Finnish sauna, the Victorian bathhouse, each echoing faintly that ancient human desire for warmth, water, and renewal. If you close your eyes, you can almost feel it. The soft humidity in the air, the steady drip of water, the quiet company of other strangers, friends, all equal in that shared simplicity. For a few moments there is no rank, no title, no labor, only warmth, only rest. And so, as the bathhouse empties and the last of the steam fades into the night, we step softly back into the cool air outside. The cobblestones glisten faintly with moisture. The streets grow quiet again. Above, the stars begin to pierce the sky. In the distance, the sound of a river steady eternal. It is there, at those riversides, that many would go next to continue the work of cleanliness, though of a different sort. For our next chapter takes us from bathing the body to cleansing the garments that clothed it. The slow, rhythmic labor of washing linen by hand, the art of medieval laundry. The bathhouse door closes softly behind us. The air outside is cool again, carrying the scent of damp wood and the faint trace of smoke from nearby chimneys. In the distance, a river murmurs, a constant voice winding through the land, as it has for centuries. Follow that sound for a moment. Let it draw you down through the narrow lanes, past rows of timber-bird houses, their shutters half open to the fading light. The street gives way to open fields, and then, finally, to the bank of a shallow stream. Here, kneeling by the water's edge, you would find the quiet industry of the medieval laundress. The art of washing clothes was laborious, repetitive, and strangely beautiful in its rhythm. There were no washboards, no soap flakes, no machines. Only hands, water, ash, and patience. Imagine a small cluster of women mothers, daughters, perhaps servants of a manor house gathered at dawn. They spread their linen out on the grass nearby, baskets heavy with shirts, sheets, and shifts. Their sleeves are rolled high, their skirts tucked up from the mud. The air is cool enough to sting the fingers, but they have work to do before the day warms. The soundscape is gentle yet alive. The splash of water as cloths are dipped, the slap of fabric struck against smooth stones, the soft murmur of conversation, half gossip, half prayer. To wash, they begin by soaking the garments in cold water from the stream. If the water runs clear and fast, it helps lift away the dirt. Then comes the cleansing agent, not the scented soaps of modern shelves, but humble, handmade materials. One of the most common was lye, a mixture of ashes from burned wood, steeped in water until the liquid became faintly caustic. This solution could cut through grease and grime. Some laundresses added urine, strong in ammonia, which acted as a natural cleanser and whitener. It sounds unpleasant to modern ears, but in those times it was a valued and effective tool. Urine was even collected from city streets by those who made a small living from selling it to laundries and tanneries. Yet the process was not as crude as it might seem. Linen, the most common fabric of the age, was tough and could endure the scrubbing and boiling. And once it was rinsed and dried, it carried the clean, fresh scent of the open air. Washing, in the medieval world, was a ritual of repetition. A cycle of wetting, scrubbing, beating, rinsing, and drying. Picture the movement. Hands plunging into the water, lifting the heavy wet cloth, wringing it out, then striking it rhythmically against a flat stone. The sound is soft, steady thwop thwop, echoing down the riverbank like a slow heartbeat. Each strike shakes loose the dust of daily life, the sweat of labor, the soot from hearth, fires, the stains of earth. Each rinse in the cold stream brings renewal. This was women's work, mostly, though not always. In monasteries, lay brothers handled the laundry of the monks, working in long stone washhouses called lavatoria. There, troughs of water ran constantly, and the sound of washing mixed with the low hum of chanting from nearby cloisters. Whether by river or by stone basin, the work was the same cleansing through rhythm and patience. When the first wash was done, the linen would often be boiled. Large cauldrons were filled with water and lye, set over open fires. Steam rose in thick white plumes, and the smell was strong wood smoke, ash, and damp cloth. The laundress stirred the garments with long wooden poles, careful not to burn her hands. The heat helped lift away oils and brighten the fabric. After boiling, the water was poured out, and the garments were wrung and rinsed again and again until the water ran clear. Then came the whitening, an art in itself. The cloths were laid out across the grass or hedges, left to the sun and air. The dew of morning and the warmth of daylight worked together to bleach them naturally. This process, called grassing, could take several days. Picture rows of white linen fluttering gently in the breeze, shirts, sheets, veils, and towels, stretching across the meadow like sails on a quiet sea. The sight must have been serene, a symbol of care and diligence. The women who did this work were indispensable yet often invisible. Their hands were always red from the cold, their backs bent from lifting and wringing. And yet there was quiet pride in their skill. A well-washed linen sheet was smooth, spotless, and sweet-smelling, a mark of good housekeeping and respectability. In towns, laundresses sometimes worked for noble households, traveling up to castles or manors to collect bundles of clothing. They washed them by the river or in communal washhouses, then carried them back folded and pressed. It was hard work, but steady, and it gave them an independence rare for women of their station. Imagine them walking home in the fading light, baskets balanced on their hips, cloths still faintly warm from the sun, the scent of clean linen drifting behind them. Their footsteps echo on the cobbles, slow and even, the rhythm of an honest day's labor. Let's look at the tools of their trade. A broad wooden paddle, smooth from years of use, used to stir or beat the fabric. A wooden tub, bound with iron hoops, its surface damp and worn. Bundles of herbs tied with twine, lavender, thyme, or mints, sometimes thrown into the rinse water for fragrance. And the ever-present basket of woven willow, sturdy and patched where old fibers had split. Each item carried the marks of time dents, scratches, and the faint polish that comes from constant touch. They were simple things, but they formed the heart of domestic life. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The hush of the river, the distant call of a crow, the gentle rhythm of work splash, ring, slap, sigh. It is almost musical, this repetition. The same motion, the same sounds, day after day, season after season. A kind of meditation in motion. The laundress does not rush. She knows the pace of the water, the feel of the cloth, the time each garment needs. Her mind may wander as she works to her children, to supper waiting at home, or to the changing of the weather. The work itself allows the mind to drift. It is both labor and solace. In a time before perfume and detergent, clean linen was a badge of decency. People might go weeks without bathing, but they took pride in fresh undergarments and sheets. Linen was worn closest to the skin, absorbing sweat and oils. By keeping it clean, one kept oneself respectable. A nobleman might change his shirt daily, a sign of wealth. A peasant might own only one or two, washed as often as life allowed. But in both cases, laundry meant renewal, the small, satisfying feeling of beginning again with something clean. Laundry days were social too. Women gathered not only to wash, but to talk, to share news, tell stories, exchange advice. The riverbank became a place of quiet community. Laughter drifted across the water, mingling with the steady rhythm of their work. In towns, communal washhouses echoed with chatter. Buckets splashed, tubs creaked, and voices rose and fell like the tide. It was, in its way, the medieval version of a cafe or marketplace, a space for connection within the endless routine of daily life. Now imagine the end of such a day. The sun sinks low, turning the river to gold. The air cools. Hands are raw and tired, but the baskets are full once more, this time with clean, damp linen. The laundresses gather their things, shake out the last drops of water, and turn toward home. Behind them, the river flows on, carrying away the dust of the day. Tomorrow it will flow the same, steady and eternal, washing the same stones, whispering the same song. You can almost feel the peace of it, the sense of something done completely, simply, without haste. The art of medieval laundry was not glamorous, but it was sustaining. It kept households alive and comfortable. It marked the turning of weeks, the rhythm of seasons, and it connected those who worked in quiet companionship at the edge of the water. As the last light fades, the white linen gleams faintly and the dusk rows of fabric swaying softly in the evening wind. The scent of wet grass and wood smoke drifts over the meadow. Somewhere far away, a church bell tolls for vespers. The day is ending. But for many, another ritual of cleanliness begins not of washing, but of masking and perfuming. In our next chapter, we'll step into the chambers of nobles and merchants alike, where sweet-smelling herbs and fragrant oils replaced water. A world of rosewater, lavender, and vinegar tonics, the art of staying fresh when bathing was rare. The day has faded into evening. The sun is gone, leaving behind a pale wash of color on the horizon, faint pinks and silvers, melting into the deep blue of night. Inside a medieval home, a candle flickers. The air smells faintly of smoke, wool, and something else. A sweet, sharp fragrance rising from a small bowl on the table. It's vinegar steeped with herbs, rosemary, lavender, and sage. A simple mixture, yet in its way, a kind of perfume. In an age when bathing was rare and soap was coarse, scent became its own form of cleanliness. People sought to smell pleasant, or at least neutral, not to offend the nose, theirs or another's. And so the Middle Ages developed its own quiet art of masking, freshening, and perfuming. Let's step softly into that world of fragrance. It's not bright and overpowering like today's perfumes, but subtle, herbal, and earthy, the smell of fields, forests, and gardens captured in oils and waters. Imagine the medieval herb garden, a square plot enclosed by low walls, right next to the kitchen or cloister. It's late summer, and the air hums softly with bees. The garden is a tapestry of green, purple, and gold. Rosemary, thyme, lavender, sage, mint, marjoram, and hyssop. Each plant has its purpose. Some are for cooking, some for healing, and many for the senses. Leaves are plucked in the morning when their oils are strongest, and then dried in bundles that hang from the beams in kitchens and workshops. The scent fills the air-dry resinous, comforting. These herbs form the foundation of medieval perfume. Rosemary for freshness, lavender for calm, cloves and cinnamon, when they could be afforded, for warmth and spice. And rosewater, the most beloved of all, distilled from petals and prized for both beauty and cleanliness. To make perfume in medieval times was a patient art. Rose petals, herbs, or spices were steeped in vinegar, wine, or oil. The liquid absorbed their essence, and after days or even weeks, was strained and bottled in small glass vials or ceramic jars. Sometimes a simple form of distillation was used, a process involving heat and condensation, known in the Islamic world long before it reached Western Europe. Picture a small workshop filled with the quiet clink of glass, the faint hiss of fire beneath a copper still. A perfumer, perhaps an apothecary, by trade stirs petals into warm water. The air grows heavy with the scent of roses and citrus. Outside, night gathers, but inside time seems to stand still in the warm glow of candlelight. These fragrant waters were used for washing the face and hands, sprinkled on linens, or dabbed at the wrists and temples. In wealthier households, they were even added to the bath, tinting the steam with sweetness. A noblewoman might be known for her preferred scent, rose and amber perhaps, or violet and clove, a signature fragrance as recognizable as a modern perfume. In medieval thinking, scent was more than just pleasant, it was moral. Good smells were seen as signs of health and virtue. Bad odors, or miasmas, were thought to carry disease and corruption. To surround yourself with fragrance was to protect both the body and the soul. Imagine a merchant's wife sprinkling her home with rosewater before guests arrive. She walks slowly through the room, trailing droplets from her fingers onto the rushes that cover the floor. These rushes, dry grasses mixed with herbs, release their scent when stepped on, a soft perfume underfoot. Lavender, mint, and thyme mingle with the faint smoke from the hearth. The house smells clean, even if water hasn't touched its walls in months. This, too, was a form of hygiene, cleanliness by scent, not soap. A delicate illusion, but a comforting one. Clothing was also scented. Fine linen undergarments might be stored with dried herbs or wrapped in perfumed cloths. Gloves, especially in later centuries, were treated with fragrant oils, the origin of the scented glove that became so fashionable across Europe. Even belts, purses, and small pouches were filled with herbs. These little sachets were called pomanders or sweet bags. They might hold cloves, nutmeg, or crushed rose petals sewn into linen and carried close to the body. Wealthy travelers carried spherical pomanders made of metal or carved wood, pierced with holes so the scent could escape. Some were highly ornate, divided into compartments for different ingredients. Others were simple, a small ball of wax and herbs, tied with a ribbon and worn at the waist. When you walked through a medieval street, you might smell many things: bread baking, smoke from chimneys, the tang of tanneries and stables. But if you got close to a noblewoman or a merchant, you'd catch the delicate hint of something else: roses, cinnamon, or musk, a portable pocket of purity amid the chaos. In sacred spaces, fragrance took on another meaning. Incense, a mixture of resins and oils, filled churches during Mass. Its smoke curled through the air, rising toward the vaulted ceilings, carrying with it prayers and reverence. The scent of frankincense and myrrh marked the divine, a sweetness distinct from the earthy world outside. Monks too used herbs to cleanse and sanctify their surroundings. They scattered rosemary and lavender in their cloisters, both for the pleasant scent and the supposed power to ward off illness. During times of plague, people carried small bundles of herbs near their faces, believing that sweet smells could block the foul air of disease. In this way, fragrance became both a shield and a solace, a quiet companion through fear and faith alike. The use of scent often reflected social standing. The poor relied on herbs grown in their own gardens, mint, sage, or wildflowers gathered from the hedgerows. They might rub their hands with crushed leaves or rinse in vinegar to remove odors after work. The middle classes could purchase small vials of scented water from apothecaries. The wealthy, meanwhile, could afford imported spices and exotic resins from the East: cinnamon, ambergris, and musk, costly luxuries that arrived through the trade routes of Venice and Genoa. In noble courts, fragrance became a true sign of refinement. Perfumed oils were used to anoint hair, beards, and skin. Banquet halls were sprinkled with rose water before feasts. Even letters were scented, the parchment brushed with a trace of violet or amber, so that the fragrance lingered as the seal was broken. Imagine receiving a letter like that. The smell of distant gardens, pressed into wax and parchment, arriving across miles of dust and wind. It must have felt like holding a memory of summer. There's something deeply human about this devotion to fragrance. Even now, centuries later, certain smells can transport us to places we have never been. For the medieval mind, scent was tied to the soul, a reflection of purity, balance, and harmony. To smell pleasant was to live in order. To smell foul was to be corrupted or ill. In a world without our modern antiseptics or perfumes, fragrance was a form of quiet control away, of shaping the world when so much was uncertain. It brought comfort in sickness, dignity in poverty, and a touch of beauty to daily life. Now imagine, if you will, the end of a medieval day. The fire burns low, a single candle flickers. In the stillness, someone pours a little rose water into a basin, dipping a cloth and pressing it gently to their face. The scent is soft and clean, the memory of gardens and sunlight, even in winter. They close their eyes, breathing it in. It is not luxury, it is comfort. A small reminder that the body can be tended and the spirit refreshed, even in a world of toil. The room darkens. Outside, a faint breeze stirs the herbs hanging from the beams, dried lavender, rosemary, and thyme, and releases one last breath of fragrance into the air. The night is quiet, and the past seems to rest, peaceful and still. As the candle gutters out, the scent lingers faint and fading, like memory itself. But not all matters of hygiene were so pleasant. For the next part of our journey, we'll turn from the sweet perfumes of the chamber to the more practical corners of cleanliness. The mouth too required its own care, though, without toothpaste, brushes, or dentists as we know them. So in our next video, we will explore the surprising world of medieval dental care, how people brushed their teeth, freshened their breath, and tended to their smiles in a time when a single toothache could shadow a life. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it. The night has grown still. The last candle flickers low, its light a soft golden pool on the table. Outside, the wind stirs faintly through narrow streets, carrying with it the scent of hearth fires and cooling earth. In a world of wood and stone, of smoke and rain, even the simplest acts of care took on a quiet dignity. One of these was the tending of the mouth, the care of teeth and gums, and the long, slow effort to keep them clean and pain-free. Tonight, we'll wander softly into that forgotten corner of medieval life, the small rituals, the strange remedies, and the gentle wisdom of dental care in the Dark Ages. There were no dentists in the modern sense, no rows of gleaming instruments, no scented antiseptics. But the human need for comfort and cleanliness is ancient, And even in the Middle Ages, people understood that a fresh mouth meant health, and that neglect could lead to pain. Imagine yourself in a small medieval home, perhaps at the close of the day. The fire has burned down to embers. The family sits quietly, the last meal finished bread, broth, perhaps a little cheese. Someone takes a small stick from the hearth, a chewing twig cut from a fragrant branch, and begins to clean their teeth. It is a slow, careful motion, done without hurry. The room is silent, except for the faint crackle of the fire and the soft rasp of wood against enamel. This is dental care as it was known then, simple, thoughtful, effective in its own quiet way. Across Europe, the chewing twig or toothstick was the most common tool for cleaning teeth. It could be cut from a variety of woods: hazel, willow, birch, or rosemary. The end was chewed until the fibers softened, forming a natural brush. Then, with small, circular motions, the user rubbed their teeth clean. Certain plants were chosen for their fragrance or antiseptic qualities. Rosemary left a pleasant taste, mint freshened the breath, and walnut and birch were thought to strengthen the gums. In monasteries, where discipline ruled every act, the use of such twigs after meals became a quiet habit, a gesture of order and care. Imagine rows of monks sitting after supper, each one chewing the end of a twig in thoughtful silence, the candlelight reflecting off stone walls. The rhythm is slow and meditative. The world, for a moment, feels still. Water was often flavored or infused for cleansing the mouth. Vinegar mixed with salt, or wine steeped with herbs, was used to rinse away food and refresh the breath. One popular medieval recipe called for mint, sage, and anise, boiled in wine and cooled before use. Others suggested a rinse of honey and vinegar, thought to harden the gums. There is something almost ritualistic in the act, the tilt of the cup, the swirl of liquid, the cool sensation against the tongue. In a time when few luxuries existed, such simple comfort must have felt precious. For the wealthy, glass bottles of scented rinse might sit upon a washstand, beside combs and jars of rosewater. For the poor, a handful of mint leaves or a swish of clean water would suffice. But in both cases, the purpose was the same: to feel renewed, to wash away the day. Tooth powders existed too long before the invention of modern toothpaste. They were made from crushed herbs, salt, ashes, or even ground bone. Sometimes chalk was added for whitening. The mixture would be rubbed onto the teeth with a cloth or with the softened end of a stick. A recipe from a 14th century text recommends a mixture of burnt rosemary, fine salt, and pepper to make the teeth white and the breath sweet. Another suggests powdered coral and sage. Of course, the effect on enamel could be harsh, but the intent was sincere: to polish, purify, and protect. Picture a noblewoman sitting before her small mirror of polished metal. Her maid brings a small box of fragrant powder. She dips her cloth into it and rubs gently, her movements deliberate and unhurried. The air smells faintly of salt and herbs. It is both beauty ritual and health practice, a quiet act of self-care in a world of uncertainty. Without microscopes or modern medicine, medieval people explained tooth decay in their own terms. They believed in tooth worms, tiny creatures said to gnaw at the roots of teeth, causing pain and decay. This idea, though mistaken, was rooted in observation. When a tooth ached, something invisible was destroying it. The cures reflected this belief: herbal poultices, smoke blown into the mouth, or powders meant to drive out the worm. It sounds strange now, but it speaks to the creativity of the human spirit, the way people have always tried to understand their suffering. Behind every superstition lies the same impulse: to heal and to make sense of pain. Toothache was one of the most dreaded afflictions. There were no anesthetics, no reliable surgeries. Yet medieval healers, from monks to wise women, offered a wide range of remedies. Cloves were known to ease pain, their oil numbing the gums. Chewing parsley was said to draw out inflammation. A paste of honey and crushed sage could be applied to soothe swelling. In severe cases, stronger measures were taken, like tooth extraction with iron tongs. But we will not linger on those, for ours is a gentle story. Instead, we focus on the care that came before the daily efforts to prevent such pain, to keep decay at bay through cleanliness and prayer alike. In medieval thought, the mouth was symbolic. It was the gateway of the soul, the instrument of speech and song, the place where prayers were formed. To keep it clean was both a physical and spiritual act. The same water that washed the mouth might be blessed. The same herbs that freshen the breath might be used in ritual. In some monasteries, monks were taught to rinse their mouths before reading the psalms aloud, as a sign of purity. The act of cleansing thus became a meditation, a moment of preparation before addressing the sacred. In a time without toothpaste, the concept of fresh breath still held meaning. A pleasant smell was seen as a sign of health and virtue. People chewed parsley, mint, or aniseed after meals, especially after eating fish or strong cheese. Some carried small sprigs of herbs tucked in their collars, so the scent would rise toward their faces. Others nibbled cloves or fennel seeds, leaving a faint sweetness on the tongue. Imagine the quiet after supper, the fire fading, the day's work done. Someone takes a sprig of mint, crushes it gently between their fingers, and breathes in the cool fragrance. A moment of stillness. A breath that feels clean. Sleep comes easier in such calm. In villages and small towns, there were always those who specialized in treating ailments of the teeth, often barbers, blacksmiths, or healers. They pulled teeth, offered powders, or brewed herbal infusions. But most people relied on home remedies, passed down through generations. Mothers taught daughters, monks copied recipes, and apothecaries blended herbs by the light of oil lamps. Every act of care, however small, carried the same purpose: to bring ease, to restore harmony between body and spirit. It's easy to imagine the medieval world as harsh and primitive. But in these quiet acts, brushing with a twig, rinsing with wine and mint, chewing parsley for freshness, we see something timeless, a tenderness toward the body. A wish to feel clean, dignified, and whole. The implements were simple. The intent was not. Each motion, the soft rubbing, the careful rinse, was part of the rhythm of life, a balance between necessity and ritual. And perhaps, if we listen closely, we can hear it still. The crackle of the hearth, the hush of the night, the gentle scrape of wood against teeth. The sound of someone centuries ago caring for themselves in the simplest, most human way. The fire burns low, the night deepens. And as the mouth is cleaned and the day fades away, another less delicate necessity of hygiene remains. For even in castles and monasteries, life required certain practical arrangements. Where did people go when nature called? How was waste managed, quietly and discreetly, behind stone walls and wooden doors? We'll step into the hidden spaces of the medieval world. The garderobes, the privies, the chamber pots, and the ingenuity that made daily life livable. The hour is late now. The air outside has turned cool and still. A faint drizzle falls beyond the shutters, pattering softly against the wooden frames. Inside, the fire is almost gone. Only embers remain, glowing faintly red beneath a film of ash. In this deep stillness, we turn our attention to a subject rarely spoken of, yet as constant as breath. How people, centuries ago, managed the most ordinary human need, the call of nature. We approach it gently as historians and quiet observers. For even in the past, where life was simpler, dignity and privacy were valued, and every society found its own ways to balance necessity with comfort. Imagine, if you will, a medieval town, its narrow lanes winding between timber-built houses, its streets paved not with stone, but with packed earth. There are no pipes beneath your feet, no underground sewers carrying waste away. Yet people lived, worked, and thrived here for centuries. They built systems, simple, ingenious, and sometimes surprisingly advanced, to manage what every day required. Inside humble cottages, the solution was simple: a chamber pot, made of clay or pewter, kept beneath the bed. At night, when darkness pressed close and the cold made outdoor trips unwelcome, one would reach for the pot quietly, do what was needed, and replace the lid. In the morning, its contents were carried outside, often to the garden or a pit behind the house. There was a rhythm to it, a practicality. Unpleasant, perhaps, but ordinary, as much a part of life as eating or sleeping. The chamber pot was, in its own way, a humble luxury. It spared people the chill of night air and the danger of uneven ground. Children were taught early to use it with care, to empty it far from the doorway, to rinse it with water or vinegar. In wealthier homes, servants performed this duty discreetly. In the castles of nobles, entire chambers were dedicated to this task, small rooms tucked into the thickness of the walls, called garderobes. These spaces were narrow and private, often with a wooden seat set over a vertical shaft. The shaft might lead to a pit, a moat, or the open air. It was simple gravity, effective, low maintenance, and remarkably clever. Let's imagine one together. You walk along a stone corridor, the air cool and faintly scented with lime and old mortar. A small arched doorway stands half hidden in the wall. Inside, a wooden bench is built into the stone, with a round hole at its center. Beneath it, darkness, and far below, the slow trickle of waste washing away into the moat. The room is quiet except for the faint whistle of wind through the opening. A single candle flickers beside you. It feels private, even safe, a moment alone amid the noise of castle life. Garderobes were often located along outer walls, for airflow and sanitation. Some had small drainage channels carved into the stone and sand or straw placed nearby for cleaning. For the medieval noble, this was the height of practicality and perhaps comfort. The word garderobe means, quite literally, to guard one's robes. It might seem strange now, but clothing was sometimes hung inside these small rooms. The strong odors and the cool air were believed to repel insects and moths. So a noble's garments, silks, wools, and linens, might hang above the chute that carried waste away. In a sense, it was both closet and toilet, a curious combination of cleanliness and necessity. Such was the medieval way, inventive, pragmatic, and unbothered by the divisions we make today. Beyond the castle, in the crowded towns of medieval Europe, sanitation took on a different form. Cities like London, Paris, and York built communal latrines along riverbanks or over drainage ditches. They were simple wooden structures open to the air with benches and openings above flowing water. At dawn, workers known as gong farmers or nightmen began their tasks, removing waste from pits, cleaning, and carrying it away to be buried outside the city walls. It was demanding work, done quietly, often by night, and it kept the towns livable. The nightmen were not celebrated, but they were essential, the unseen caretakers of health and hygiene. Their work reminds us that even in the humblest labor, there is purpose and dignity. In monasteries, order governed everything, including hygiene. Toilets, known as reredoors, were often built beside the dormitories, connected by covered walkways. Monks rose before dawn, walked in silence along stone passages, and used these communal spaces with ritual discipline. Running water was sometimes diverted from nearby streams to flush the reredoors, an early form of plumbing. Stone channels carried waste away, keeping the monastery clean and the air sweet. It is strange perhaps to think of monks in their robes tending to such practical needs, but in truth, their attention to cleanliness reflected their devotion to order and purity, both physical and spiritual. For ordinary people, privacy was a rare luxury. Families often shared living spaces, and modesty was adapted to practicality. A chamber pot behind a curtain, or a visit to the privy at dawn, might be all one could expect. Still, there was care taken, washing afterward with water, wiping with moss, straw, or linen scraps. In some regions, smooth stones or seashells were used. Each culture, each household, had its own customs, quietly passed down. Such details may seem distant, but they reveal something universal, that even in hardship, people sought cleanliness, routine, and a measure of grace. The medieval world was not, as often imagined, entirely foul. Yes, there were smells, wood smoke, tallow, animals, but people worked constantly to counter them. Rushes and herbs were scattered on floors, vinegar was used to cleanse, and open-air privies were built wherever possible. To walk through a castle courtyard at dawn was to smell hay, DAM peastone, and the faint, clean tang of lime wash, used to disinfect walls. It was not perfumed, but it was alive, fresh with the scent of earth and labor. The garderobe, too, was part of this landscape, ordinary, unspoken, but necessary. As you picture these spaces, the small wooden seat, the candlelight, the quiet solitude, remember that history, even in its most private corners, connects us to what is timeless. We all seek comfort. We all seek relief, privacy, and the assurance that the day's burdens can be left behind. In the medieval world, that comfort might come from a humble pot, a stone chute, or a stream running beneath the cloister. And when it was done, life went on, meals to prepare, prayers to say, work to complete. Everything was part of the same gentle rhythm, the cycle of living, cleansing, resting, and beginning again. Now, as the night deepens, the fire in our imagined hearth has gone out. The world outside is silent. And from this most practical topic, our thoughts turn again toward the spiritual. Cleanliness was not only of the body, but also of the soul. In the monasteries and churches of medieval Europe, washing was a sacred act, a symbol of purity, humility, and renewal. The night has deepened into silence. The faint crackle of the hearth has faded, leaving only the quiet rhythm of your own breath. Somewhere in the darkness of centuries past, a bell tolls once, low and distant, the call to prayer echoing through a monastery cloister. In that stillness, men rise from their straw pallets. Their footsteps are soft upon the stone. A single lamp flickers, casting long shadows upon the walls. They move toward the washing basin, as they do each morning and night, because before one prays, one must cleanse. This was the belief of the medieval world, that water did not merely wash away dirt, but also prepared the soul. And so, in monasteries, churches, and homes alike, cleanliness was not only practical, it was sacred. In the Christian world of the Middle Ages, water held a deep symbolic power. From the baptismal font to the monastic washroom, it represented renewal, forgiveness, and divine grace. When a child was baptized, holy water touched its brow, a ritual washing that marked a new beginning. Each time believers entered a church, they dipped their fingers into water once more, tracing the sign of the cross upon their foreheads. This too was a kind of hygiene, not of the body, but of the spirit. Imagine stepping into a great stone church at dawn. The air is cool, almost damp, carrying the faint scent of wax and incense. Your fingers brush the surface of the holy water in the font, cool, clear, and still. A simple touch, but rich in meaning. Cleanliness, faith, and peace, all mingling quietly together. In monasteries, cleanliness was woven into the very fabric of daily life. Monks followed the rule of Saint Benedict, which emphasized both spiritual and physical order. Their days were structured around prayer, study, and labor, but also around washing, grooming, and care for the body. Before each meal, they washed their hands in silence. After tending the fields or copying manuscripts, they rinsed their faces and arms. Water flowed through channels in the cloister, diverted from nearby streams, a steady murmur that filled the air like soft music. At the center of many monasteries stood a lavatorium, a large stone basin or fountain, often carved with graceful arches. Its constant flow of water symbolized life and purity, both earthly and divine. Picture it. The sound of gentle trickling echoing through the stone corridors, the cool touch of water on skin, the hush of voices subdued by reverence. Every wash was a meditation, a pause between work and prayer, between the dust of labor and the calm of reflection. To the medieval mind, dirt and sin were often linked. Just as grime could cling to the body, sin was thought to cling to the soul. Washing, therefore, became a spiritual metaphor, a way to make visible the invisible act of repentance. In sermons and writings, priests often spoke of the stains of sin and the need to be washed clean. Pilgrims on long journeys might purify themselves in rivers before entering holy sites. Lepers and the sick too were bathed by caretakers as part of both healing and charity. Cleanliness, then, was not vanity, it was devotion. To be clean was to be closer to God, and though soap was rare and baths infrequent, the desire to feel pure ran deep through every layer of society. In some large monasteries like Cluny, Canterbury, and Monte Cassino, even bathhouses existed. These were not places of luxury, but of quiet discipline. Monks bathed in silence, often clothed in simple linen shifts. The baths were communal, their waters drawn from heated cisterns or nearby springs. Rules dictated modesty. No laughter, no excessive time spent, no indulgence in comfort. The act was functional, humble, and rhythmic, as much about spiritual focus as bodily cleanliness. It is easy to imagine the scene. The air is warm and dimly lit. Water ripples gently, steam rising in soft clouds. The sound of dripping echoes against stone. Each movement, the pouring, the rinsing, the stillness feels deliberate, almost prayerful. Cleanliness also played a role in the life of the traveler. Pilgrims journeying to holy sites such as Canterbury, Compostela, or Rome often bathed in rivers or springs before approaching a shrine. These waters were believed to possess spiritual power, the ability to cleanse the soul and protect the traveler. Along pilgrimage routes, hospices and monasteries offered not only food and shelter, but water for washing. It was both a kindness and a preparation, because when one came before a relic or knelt in prayer before a saint's tomb, one wished to be pure in body and in heart. The pilgrim's wash was a gesture of humility, the same motion repeated endlessly across centuries. Hands dipped, faces rinsed, spirits quieted. Churches and monasteries smelled unlike any other place in the medieval world. There was wax, incense, and stone, the fragrance of devotion. When priests washed the altar before Mass, they used wine or vinegar mixed with herbs, not only to purify the surface, but to offer a pleasant scent to the senses. This too was part of medieval hygiene, the intertwining of smell, cleanliness, and holiness. Sweet smells were signs of sanctity. Foul odors were thought to reveal corruption or sin. It is said that the bodies of saints upon death emitted no decay, only sweetness, a miracle known as the odor of sanctity. In this belief, scent became evidence of purity itself. To smell good was to be good. To cleanse the body was to align it with divine order. Women too practiced ritual washing in both domestic and sacred contexts. Midwives cleansed newborns with warmed water and wine. Women preparing for marriage or childbirth bathed in perfumed water when possible, seeking not indulgence but sanctity. Religious women, nuns, and anchoresses followed their own rules of hygiene, balancing modesty with care. Their washing was done privately at set times with restraint and purpose. In every case, water was not simply a tool, it was a symbol. Each drop carried meaning. To wash was to renew. There is a deep stillness in the act of washing. Even now, when you place your hands beneath a stream of water, there is a moment of peace, a pause that seems timeless. The medieval world, for all its hardships, understood that feeling well. In cloisters and cottages alike, the sound of water spoke of life. It softened labor, refreshed the weary, and connected body to spirit. The same water that filled the Monka's basin filled the rivers that turned the mills and nourished the fields. To wash was to return to that natural rhythm, to the cycle of flowing, cleansing, and beginning again. Imagine now a monk standing beside the lavatorium at dusk. The day's prayers are done. The sun sinks behind the cloister walls, and the last birds fall silent. He dips his hands into the basin, watching the water ripple softly. For a moment, he sees his reflection, faint and wavering, and then it breaks, vanishing into circles of light. It is an image of the self, imperfect, transient, cleansed anew with every ripple. He dries his hands on a simple cloth and walks back toward the chapel, where the candles glow like stars in the dimness. Clean hands, quiet heart, clean soul. The rhythm continues. And as the candles fade and the sound of water softens into silence, we leave behind the monastery walls and return to the hearths and homes of ordinary people. Not all could live so cleanly, nor could every house afford the purity of running water. The world beyond those cloisters held its own quiet struggles. Against pests, against discomfort, against the small, persistent irritations of daily life. And smoky rafters of herbs hung to dry, and of constant effort to keep small creatures at bay. The morning light in a medieval village is soft and pale, spreading slowly across thatched rooftops and garden walls. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys. Somewhere a rooster calls a single distant note that fades into the rustle of waking life. Inside a small cottage, a woman stirs the hearth. The smell of wood smoke rises, mingling with the earthy scent of straw and wool. It is warm, comforting, and alive. But in the quiet corners of that home, other life stirs as well, tiny, persistent, and ever-present. The Middle Ages weren't a time of sterile perfection. They were a world shared with creatures great and small, mice, fleas, flies, and moths. To live well meant learning how to live with them, or to gently drive them away. And so, for centuries, people developed their own forms of pest control, not with poisons or machines, but with herbs, smoke, patience, and the steady rhythm of daily care. A medieval home was not sealed like ours. The walls might be of wattle and daub-woven branches coated with clay and straw, and the roof thatched with reeds. Gaps let in air, and sometimes small visitors. Mice scurried in the rafters, insects found their way through cracks, and spiders wove webs in the corners. Yet this was not seen as filth or failure, merely the nature of things. The home was alive, in harmony with the world outside. It breathed, creaked, and rustled. And every household had its quiet ways of keeping that balance. The first line of defense was scent. Herbs filled every corner of the medieval home, hanging from beams, stuffed into mattresses, and scattered across the floor. Rushes, straw, and dried flowers were spread on the ground, not only to soften footsteps but to freshen the air. They absorbed moisture and odors, and when replaced, the old layers were carried out to the compost heap. Lavender was essential for keeping moths from precious cloth. Mint was thought to deter mice. Rue sage and wormwood were believed to drive away fleas. And where linen sheets were stored, sprigs of rosemary were tucked between the folds, their fragrance believed to repel pests and soothe sleep. Imagine a small cottage at dusk. A woman gathers herbs from her garden thyme, lavender, and tansy. She ties them with twine and hangs them from a wooden beam, where the warm air from the hearth will dry them. The scent fills the room, sweet, sharp, earthy, clean. This too was hygiene, not of soap and polish, but of scent, habit, and care. Smoke was another powerful ally. Every home had a fire, the constant heart of daily life. Its smoke curled up into the rafters, blackening the beams but also driving out insects. The scent of burning wood, though heavy, helped keep fleas and lice at bay. In some regions, people would deliberately burn herbs in the fire, juniper, sage, or bay leaves. The fragrant smoke cleansed the air, carrying with it both scent and superstition. It was thought that evil spirits and biting creatures disliked sweet smells. So the hearth served not only to cook and warm, but to purify. Each wisp of smoke was a quiet act of defense, each crackle a comfort against the unseen. Clean linen was another weapon. Beds were simple, wooden frames, ropes stretched in a lattice, and mattresses stuffed with straw, reeds, or feathers. Each season, the mattress was emptied, the straw burned or discarded, and new filling was added. This was spring cleaning long before the phrase existed. Sheets and blankets were beaten outdoors in the sunlight, the fresh air driving out dampness and pests. Sunlight, to medieval minds, was itself cleansing, a gift from God that purified by warmth and light. You can almost see it, a row of linen sheets fluttering in the wind, the scent of soapwort and river water still clinging to them, the rhythmic creak of wooden pegs in the breeze. A home reborn, at least for a while. Of course, people also relied on animals to maintain balance. Cats were common in villages and towns, valued for their hunting skills. A good mouser was prized, often fed scraps from the table and kept as a quiet companion. In barns and granaries, owls nested in the rafters, feeding on mice. Snakes, too, were sometimes tolerated in outbuildings, a natural form of pest control, accepted as part of rural life. These creatures were both feared and respected, their presence woven into folklore. To have a cat sleeping by the hearth or an owl calling from the eaves was a sign that the home was well guarded. Alongside these practical methods came superstition charms whispered and tokens hung in doorways. A dried sprig of rosemary above the lintel, a cross marked in chalk, an amulet carved from bone or shaped from wax. These were meant not only to keep insects away, but to repel the unseen bad luck, disease, or envy. In a world where pest and plague often walked hand in hand, protection was both physical and spiritual. Even the herbs themselves carried double meanings. Lavender for purity, basil for courage, sage for wisdom, and rue for protection. A home filled with fragrance was a home under watchful care. Despite all these efforts, fleas were a constant presence. They lived in bedding, clothing, and straw their bites and accepted irritation, a part of life's texture. Yet even here, people found ways to ease the discomfort. They bathed when possible, rubbed vinegar into the skin, or sprinkled herbs on their clothes. Linen, when freshly washed and sun-dried, brought relief cool and clean against the skin. Children were checked for lice, their hair combed with fine-toothed wooden combs. It was slow, methodical work, done with patience and care. In noble households, servants were sometimes tasked with flea catching, using small combs or wax cloths to trap and remove pests. In the poorest homes, families simply endured, scratching and laughing and carrying on. Humanity, as always, adapted. In towns, rats were the greater concern. They fed on grain stores, gnawed through wood, and left trails of destruction. Cats helped, but so did human vigilance. Food was stored in hanging baskets or sealed chests. Floors were swept daily, not just with twig brooms, but sometimes with damp cloths to gather dust. Markets were required by law to keep stalls clean and free of refuse. In some places, rat catchers roamed the streets, carrying cages and ferrets. They were paid in coins or food, and their work was vital, though rarely celebrated. The city, too, had its rhythm of cleanliness, a balance between chaos and control maintained through constant effort. Old household manuals give us a glimpse into this world. To drive away fleas, take rue and wormwood, lay them beneath the bed. to keep moths from linen. Scatter lavender and mint in the chests. To keep mice from the pantry, sprinkle flour with pepper and store herbs of sharp scent. Each recipe is simple, domestic, and oddly soothing, a record of care passed from hand to hand. They tell us that people, long before science, observed the world closely and worked with it, not against it. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The faint rustle of straw beneath your feet. The crackle of the hearth. The soft flutter of herbs hanging from the rafters. The whisper of the broom against the floor. It is the sound of constant tending, the quiet rhythm of life devoted to keeping chaos at bay. And though the tools were humble, the purpose was noble. To create a place of safety, warmth, and rest. A clean home, a sleeping child, a calm heart, that was enough. When we think of the Middle Ages, we often imagine dirt and discomfort. But in truth, medieval people lived in harmony with their environment, resourceful, observant, and endlessly patient. They understood the power of scent, of sunlight, of fire and air. They cleaned, not for show, but for peace. In every home, no matter how small, there was pride in neatness, in good smell, and the small rituals that made a house into a refuge. The world turned season by season, rushes renewed, herbs gathered, life maintained through care. As evening falls again, the cottage quiets. The fire burns low. The air smells faintly of mint and smoke. In the corner, a cat curls up, eyes half closed. The work of keeping pests at bay, of tending, protecting, and soothing is done for the day. But tomorrow, another kind of tending will begin. The tending of the self through dress, grooming, and appearance. For even in the Middle Ages, what one wore said something about who one was, and how one kept clean beneath those many layers of wool and linen was an art in itself. Imagine the first light of morning spilling softly across the cobblestones of a medieval town. It brushes the rooftops of timber-framed houses and the thatched cottages just beyond. The air carries the faint scent of straw, wood smoke, and the lingering perfume of herbs hung to dry in the rafters. Inside, life begins. People rise slowly, stretching stiff limbs, and gather their clothing for the day. For a person in the Middle Ages, the choice of what to wear was deeply connected to hygiene, comfort, and even health. Clothing was so much more than decoration. It was a constant barrier between the body and the elements. A shield against the dirt and insects that were a part of daily life, and a subtle reflection of one's place in society. Let's picture a typical day. A man would first slip into a linen shirt, soft and lightweight, worn close against the skin. Over this, he'd wear a wool tunic or a doublet, which was heavier and coarser, designed to provide warmth and protection. Leg coverings, stockings, and sturdy shoes would follow, along with cloaks or hoods when venturing outdoors. For women, the layers were just as complex. A linen shift, often ankle length, served as the first layer of protection and comfort next to the skin. Gowns or kirtles made of wool or silk were added on top, sometimes lined with fur or decorated with beautiful embroidery. Aprons were almost always worn to guard against dirt during daily chores. But these layers were about more than just modesty. That linen garment underneath the shift was soft and absorbent. It acted as a crucial barrier, catching sweat, absorbing oils, and reducing the need to frequently wash the more expensive outer garments. Even though bathing wasn't a daily ritual like it is today, this combination of linen and wool kept the body relatively clean. The tactile experience, the scratch of wool against the smoothness of linen, created a daily awareness of the body, a feeling of being protected and soothed by fabric. Linen was truly treasured. It was soft, breathable, and absorbent qualities that medieval people understood intuitively, long before we had the science to explain them. The primary way to feel clean was by changing your linen garments. A noble household might have dozens of shifts, changing them daily or even more often. Even in humbler homes, shifts were laundered by the river or pond, washed with lye made from ash, and hung carefully to dry in the sun and wind. Sunlight was believed to be a purifier. A sheet flapping gently on a line wasn't just drying. It was being cleansed, having its freshness restored, and warding off insects. The rustle of linen in the breeze, soft against bare hands, was a comforting rhythm repeated across villages, towns, and castles. The outer garments, made of heavier wool, silk, or brocade, were worn over the clean linen. These were much harder to wash and were often just brushed or aired out instead. In this way, cleanliness and fashion were subtly balanced. The inner layer provided hygiene, while the outer layer displayed status and wealth. Color and cut mattered a great deal. Dyeing fabrics in bright colors required skill and was very expensive, so a vibrant garment was a clear sign of wealth. Long trains, intricate embroidery, and perfectly fitted sleeves distinguished the noble from the commoner. Yet underneath it all, the same rituals of washing, brushing, and airing applied to everyone. Even the style of clothing affected hygiene. Loose, flowing garments allowed for better airflow and trapped less sweat. In contrast, tightly fitted sleeves or heavy layers of wool demanded careful attention to avoid discomfort and odor. The medieval person became intimately aware of their body's rhythms through the very fabrics they wore. Clothing was also often scented. Lavender, rosemary, or rosewater were tucked between layers of fabric, sprinkled on linen, or hung in wardrobes. Perfume wasn't just for pleasure. It was seen as an extension of hygiene, a gentle barrier against natural body odors. Powdered herbs or clays were sometimes used too, rubbed onto undergarments or brushed into the hair. These rituals were slow, deliberate, and calming. They transformed the simple act of getting dressed into a full sensory experience. The soft rustle of fabric, the subtle fragrance, the satisfaction of smooth, clean linen against the skin. Even the act of brushing woolen cloaks and coats was a form of care. Using long wooden brushes or just their hands, people would remove dust and loose fibers. It was both practical and meditative, a quiet part of the daily rhythm, a moment to slow down and attend to oneself. Feet, which we often overlook, also received attention. Socks, stockings, and shoes were made of leather, wool, or cloth. They protected against cold and damp, and their cleanliness mattered for comfort and health. Shoes could be aired by the hearth at night, and feet were washed when water was available, sometimes rubbed with herbs to prevent odor. The simple act of removing shoes upon entering the home was a practice of maintaining cleanliness, creating a barrier between the dirt of the outside world and the clean interior. Accessories played a role too. Belts, pouches, and hats weren't merely decorative. They were functional, protecting clothing from wear and tear, carrying essential items, and subtly signaling the wearer's status. Hats, hoods, and veils offered protection from dust and sun. Gloves shielded hands during work or travel. Even these small details contributed to personal hygiene by keeping skin and garments cleaner. The act of dressing itself was almost a form of meditation. Linen garments were carefully tied or laced, outer garments smooth, and sleeves adjusted. Belts, clasps, and pins were arranged with precision. Imagine standing by a window as morning light warms the room, the faint aroma of herbs in the air. You slip your fingers into the soft folds of linen, feeling its cool smoothness, and adjust the layers of wool over it. Each movement is small, deliberate, and calming, a slow, quiet preparation for the day ahead. In this way, clothing was both practical and soothing. It was a quiet art of protection, comfort, and gentle self-care. Of course, hygiene and fashion intersected differently depending on wealth. Nobles had access to plenty of clean linen, perfumed oils, and multiple changes of clothes. Peasants relied on just a few well-maintained shifts, airing and washing them whenever possible. Yet both shared the same fundamental principles: clean layers next to the skin, careful airing, and slow, thoughtful maintenance. Even the poorest households understood the power of a clean shift or a well-brushed cloak. It brought comfort and a sense of order to a life that was often unpredictable. The seasons shaped everything. In winter, heavier layers trapped warmth, but required more attention to moisture and odor. In summer, lighter linen allowed sweat to evaporate, while herbs and perfumes refreshed both body and fabrics. Changing with the seasons became a natural rhythm, airing the heavy winter cloak in spring, replacing the straw in mattresses and preparing lighter garments for the warmer days ahead. The cycle of clothing mirrored the cycles of nature, grounding daily life in a calm, steady repetition. Fashion in the Middle Ages was more than just vanity. It was a gentle negotiation between the body and the world, between comfort, cleanliness, and self-expression. Each garment, each layer, each soft brush of linen or wool was part of a quiet ritual of care. It's a beautiful reminder that even in a world without modern showers or laundry machines, people found their own ways to feel clean, protected, and human. Through careful layering, attention to fabric, and the thoughtful use of herbs and scent, they created a sense of order and peace in their everyday lives. As night settles softly over villages and towns, the flicker of candlelight glints off wooden beams and stone walls. The air carries the faint, comforting aromas of herbs and drying laundry. Outside, the world rests, but inside, the quiet rituals of hygiene and care linger, echoing the slow, steady rhythms of centuries past. Tonight, we look back across time, tracing the long, gentle evolution of cleanliness. From the simple practices of medieval households to the first soaps and baths of later centuries, we explore how people discovered, refined, and cherished ways to care for their bodies. By the late Middle Ages, the foundations of hygiene were well established, though they were very different from our modern standards. Linen shifts, layers of clothing, careful airing, herbs, and modest bathing routines were the daily practices of millions. People understood intuitively that cleanliness brought comfort, protection, and a sense of dignity. Even if their methods seem sparse by today's measures, the medieval approach was remarkably structured. Think of it as a quiet, mindful rhythm. Daily or weekly washing of the skin where possible. Laundering of linen shifts and undergarments, often by rivers or streams. Brushing and airing outer garments to maintain their freshness. And the thoughtful use of herbs, perfumes, and simple oils to soothe, refresh, or mask natural scents. The rhythm of these routines created a quiet stability, a gentle care that soothed both body and mind. As Europe emerged from the Middle Ages, new ideas and technologies slowly transformed hygiene. During the Renaissance, perfumed oils, scented waters, and soaps made from animal fats and wood ashes began to circulate among the wealthier classes. This period was marked by experimentation. Cologne-style fragrances and rosewater sprays complemented the long-established use of herbs. Soap-making techniques improved, producing firmer, longer-lasting bars. Public interest in bathing persisted, though social attitudes shifted in ways that sometimes discouraged frequent communal bathing. Imagine a noblewoman in Florence or Paris. She might bathe less often than we expect, but her skin and linen are scented with delicate oils. Her shifts and gowns are carefully aired, pressed, and perfumed. The rituals are slower, more ornate, yet still rooted in the same principles of comfort and hygiene that medieval peasants and artisans practiced daily. Even as fashions changed and outer garments became heavier and more layered, the focus on linen, airflow, and personal scent remained central. The medieval foundation endured, quietly guiding these innovations. By the 17th century, soap production expanded, especially in regions like France, England, and the Low Countries. Soap was no longer a luxury solely for nobles. Artisans, merchants, and middle-class households began to use it more regularly. Olive oil, animal fats, and alkaline ash were combined and boiled carefully. Hard, fragrant soaps became common in wealthier homes, while simpler versions circulated more widely. People's approach to bathing slowly shifted as well. While full immersion baths were still occasional, hand washing, face washing, and hair care became more routine. The smell of soap, once rare and treasured, began to blend into daily life, offering a subtle comfort and reassurance. It is remarkable to imagine the gradual adoption of these practices. From the riverbank scrubbing of medieval peasants, to the softly perfumed washcloths of Renaissance women, and finally to the firm bars of soap gently lathered on skin, the evolution is a testament to human curiosity and care. The Industrial Revolution brought profound changes. Urban populations grew, plumbing expanded, and new access to clean water made bathing more practical for many people. Soap became affordable and abundant. Factories produced standardized bars for households across Europe and North America. Public bathhouses provided spaces for those without home facilities. Awareness of germs and disease gradually influenced attitudes toward cleanliness. Where medieval people relied on linen and herbs, their descendants could now enjoy daily baths, hair washing, and freshly laundered clothing with far less labor. The tactile rituals remained, but modern convenience allowed them to become gentler and more frequent, easing the physical strain of washing and laundering by hand. Today, we take for granted warm showers, liquid soaps, toothpaste, deodorants, and laundry machines. The effort that once required hours by the river, careful airing, and meticulous brushing has been replaced by ease and efficiency. Yet there is something to cherish in the medieval approach: the attention to detail, the rhythmic care of clothing and linens, the gentle scent of herbs and flowers, the mindfulness embedded in each small act of washing or airing. Imagine yourself folding a freshly laundered linen shift, brushing woolen outerwear, or rubbing lavender into your hair. Even without modern conveniences, the act is intimate, soothing, and mindful. It creates a connection across centuries, reminding us that human beings have always cared for their bodies, slowly refining techniques, learning, and discovering comfort. Through these eras, the underlying human desire remained constant: to feel clean, comfortable, and in harmony with one's environment. As you lie in bed, imagine the layers of history folding gently around you. The rustle of linen shifts drying in the sun, the soft fragrance of herbs, the careful brushing of woolen cloaks. These small acts of care echo through time. Hygiene is more than just cleanliness. It is mindfulness, ritual, and the subtle pursuit of comfort and dignity. From the medieval household to the modern bathroom, each generation discovered its own ways to honor the body, soothe the senses, and create a calm, orderly life. And now, as you drift towards sleep, let the centuries lull you softly. Feel the continuity of care, the gentle rhythm of daily life, and the comforting thought that people long ago, just like you, sought calm and cleanliness, wrapping themselves in layers of fabric, scent, and gentle routines. Let your breathing slow, your mind soften, and imagine the quiet rustle of linen in a medieval home, the faint scent of lavender in the air, and the soft whisper of centuries guiding you toward rest. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking and subscribing for more content like this. Sweet dreams.